Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a country, we need to consider, I believe, how we regulate outbound investments of critical sectors as part of our broader economic resiliency strategy. The COVID pandemic revealed structural weaknesses in the United States supply chain, and we're still feeling the pain of those vulnerabilities today. So, Professor Dansman, what were some of the consequences of having so much of our critical production abroad, particularly in countries like China?
Thank you for the question. I think that when we think specifically about the supply chain shocks that we experienced because of COVID, we should separate out what were demand shocks plus supply shocks of zero COVID policy versus national security concerns for extended periods of time, right? So the CHIPS Act in particular has been working to, the idea behind that is to bring back some supply and to diversify the supply chain so that we're not over-reliant on just a few nodes in the chip supply chain. But I think that we want to be careful to not overlearn the example of the COVID pandemic, which was very much about shocks to the system that are now working themselves out.
Yeah, but it's interesting, shocks to the system that were working out. But at the same time, we had doctors and nurses who had to improvise in the creation of personal protective gear as we struggled to get it from other parts of the world. I don't know what the next virus will be. There will be one at some point. Hopefully not, but at some point there will be one. And we have to think about that. Let me ask you, would a lack of a comprehensive outbound investment strategy for certain critical sectors mitigate the benefits of recent efforts to strengthen our supply chains?
Well, I think when we consider the reasons why firms move overseas, it's normally because of commercial viability in the U.S. And so if the goal of the Congress is to ensure that we retain some amount of domestic capabilities, there are other measures that we should use beyond prohibiting outbound investment to actually help on the side of making those types of investments in the U.S. commercially viable.
Okay. Well, I believe our lack of outbound investment oversight in the sensitive industries has the potential to hamper the competitiveness of our firms. Practices such as intellectual property theft are all too common in parts of the world, especially China, which harm the ability of U.S. firms that are playing by the rules to compete. So, Mr. Fado and Mr. Ashush, how has the stolen intellectual property in countries like China degraded our economic competitiveness and national security?
Thank you for the question, Senator. It's an incredibly important issue. It's hard to measure how it's degraded because, regrettably, it's not limited only to China. Intellectual property theft is a global issue, quite frankly, which makes it all the harder to deal with. And during my time at BIS, we were often confronted with the question that in the presence of an IP violation, should we then take an export action? And that was a reasonable request because the ability to deal with IP theft in the courts is insufficient. The bomb's already gone off. The information's already been purloined. And even if you pursue legal action, how do you undo that? You can't really disgorge the IP. Export controls as a solution to that are not ideal. So it is worth us contemplating how else to get at it, because the legal system, it's important, it's necessary, it needs to be used, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. Sir, thank you for the question. I'll just add, recently FBI Director Wray commented that every 12 hours the FBI is opening a new investigation related to espionage or hacking or something that relates to theft of intellectual property. The FBI actually has on its website a wheel of doom, I'll call it, that lists all of the different ways that the CCP steals our technology. Everything from espionage to hacking to research partnerships to academic institutions, inbound investment, the CFIUS problem. And so all of that is part of the calculus. And his estimate was that, his comment was that over 2,000 active investigations by the FBI at the time he made the comment. And so I'm not sure how to quantify that, but I think that the damage to our intellectual property and our know-how is profound. What I would say is, to me, it brings home the point that we need more information. I think many who have testified today have commented, we don't fully understand the problem, and so we need to gather more data. The problem that is with risk from outbound investment and how it compares, for example, to hacking and espionage and the other risks that we face, and whether the cost benefit is there with respect to how much resources we dedicate to one versus another.
Yeah, I would just close by saying I think that maybe one of the things that outbound investment would help us with, it seems to me that we want American companies, obviously, to continue to compete in the global economy. By the same token, it seems to me that we need to preserve the apex, the tip of the iceberg, of the most sophisticated, sensitive elements that we need to preserve to have a competitive edge and a security edge, and that the rest of what's underneath of that tip that might be generally commercially available is a way to look at how we can continue to be competitive. But I think there are some sectors, it seems to me, that we have to be concerned about not only the economic equation, but the security equation as well. Thank you very much.